What's up, world? Welcome back to your new favorite podcast of 2024, the Top 10 Movie Podcast with Mike and Molly. I'm Mike. Across from me is Molly. As always, what's going on, man?
What's going on? What's shaking, man? Any day that we're talking about movies, you know it's a good day.
It's a good day. The only thing that could peak this moment is if I could go spend a weekend watching 3 movies, as I have done twice this year. If this comes out next year, then it was last year, but one of the best highlights of my life of 2024 was getting to see a triple feature twice and within like 2 months, which is funny because you are the guy that talks like there's no movies come out anymore.
I know. But I'm not as open as you are to new film experiences. But I will say this, that you know that we are passionate about movies when we're talking about one of the best things that happened all year was going to a movie theater and watching 3 movies in a row. That's the kind of people that we are, and hopefully that's the kind of people that you are because you are listening to us.
That's right. And this week we're doing another one for you guys because we love you guys so much. We want to show our appreciation. So we're doing another 5 and 5. This is the top 10 total movies from the year 2000 to current that we think you guys should see.
Yeah, 21st century and movies that everyone should have already watched or should watch, released 2000 to now.
Yeah, my 5 are all bangers. I mean, these are all A-list actors.
Oh, for sure. All of them. I think all of them.
Mr. Box Office. So, yeah, if you guys at home haven't seen these, I'm judging some of y'all. And if you haven't seen these, once you listen, please let me know so I can flame you in the comments.
Well, and look, as we all get a little bit older, adults and how old they are continue to surprise us. And so there may be some people that are listening on this podcast that weren't even born by the year 2000, and the fact that some of these people that are potentially listening to this now and in the future may not have seen any of these movies because either they're just not into movies, they weren't old enough, whatever the reason may be. I think if you're trying to play catch up and trying to watch all the best films possibly, then you'll want to definitely pay special attention to our list. Because this is your homework assignment. Go home and watch these 5 total of 10 movies. And these are the things that me and Mike definitively think you should watch to start to catch up with some of the best films of the last 25 years.
And before we actually get started, I do want to say, when we initially started this episode, Molly gave us the intro.
Yeah.
And I was completely confused because he gave us the intro for the title of this episode.
Yeah.
And I thought we agreed to a different one.
For the first time ever. This has never happened on the podcast before.
Molly pulled out the receipts and did show me I was wrong. And so what happened was the first in the history of the Mike and Molly podcast.
Yeah, very first.
Is I actually had to go find my 5 right here, literally minutes before we hit record. So
right. So we had 3 different list ideas. We decided on 2 of them, but the 2 that I thought we were going with were different from the 2 that he thought.
Well, we were on the same page with one.
Yeah.
And that was already out. But
So
then,
this one
yes.
was different on our thinking, and it ended up I was technically right. Regardless, Mike had to come up with a list on the fly. But he typically does last minute anyway, but not this last minute. So it kind of works out anyway. But
it just goes to show you guys, you try to do this at home, like never get complacent, never get comfortable because you can always make mistakes.
This is an exciting podcast. Anything can happen. Well, one of us could entirely do a different list than the one that we're supposed to, and have to come up with one of this. This just happens, and we're going with it. You know what I mean?
That's true.
And I don't think you're going to be disappointed by it. I think it's going to be fun to hear what he had come up with in 5 minutes.
Yep.
All right. So again, this is the top 10 movies of the 21st century that we think everyone should watch. This is again, as most of the lists are, a super subjective list. This is our own opinion. We're not necessarily using box office or popularity in order to pick these. These are just 5 films that if you haven't watched a movie in the last 25 years, we're saying you should start with these 10. These 10 are a good representation of what we think the best of cinema are in our subjective view. And I say that, I've just said subjective again and for the 3rd time now, because it really is, because I'm not an Oscar guy. I don't typically watch a lot of the movies that even win Oscars. I'm just not that. I know that a lot of film critics and cinephiles do. I'm more tentpole popularity kind of movies. I think you know that about me by now. And Mike's more the indie and horror, and then kind of the opposite of me. He'll see a lot more things than me. But again, I don't think there's probably going to be a lot of great Oscar winners that are going to be on the list. Like favorite films of the year. It's not that kind of list, in my opinion. This is just more of like what we think personally are the greatest films in the last 25 years that you should have watched by now.
Agreed.
Okay. I think this one's going to be on both of our lists, but you'll have to tell me. I just heard a kind of a mention of this as you were scrambling, so maybe it is. So let's find out. To me, I didn't want to go with more than one superhero movie on the list. I just felt like it could be represented okay with just one film. I was initially going to go with Iron Man because it's really the one that really kicked off the MCU and the Marvel Cinematic Universe for me. It just technically did because it was the most successful and really kicked off the rest of them. But I think the better movie in the one that should land on this list is Avengers: Infinity War. From 2018, obviously stars Robert Downey Jr., Chris Hemsworth, Mark Ruffalo, Chris Evans, all the big superheroes.
10 minutes later.
And so this is the $2 billion movie, right? It made $2 billion at the box office. It was a monster hit, and it's not even the completion of the story. It's the first part. To me, it's the Empire Strikes Back of the Avengers movies. It's the darker one, and I say darker in the sense that it doesn't have a satisfying ending. It has a shocking, kind of depressing ending if you really think about it. But I think it's the one that sticks with most people the most, and I think people like this one more than Endgame. And I think this is the best of all the Avengers movies. Although I still see Iron Man pretty high, but to me, Avengers: Infinity War is the best superhero movie of them all. Since in the last 25 years. Mike is shaking his head. No, you're wrong.
No. I mean, I'm shaking your head at the Iron Man take because but you're right. I think Iron Man is up there. I'd say it's probably top 5 MCU film. Yeah, for sure. So I'm just shaking my head because it's like
just I reckon.
Yeah.
He thinks I reckon too, and then maybe I do. I give a lot of credit to the first film in a long series of films. The first one that kicks it off. I do give it credit. For a lot more credit than maybe those first films deserve. A lot of these films on my list are the first films of much longer, either a trilogy or a series of movies.
Of course they are.
Because that kicks it off, so it gives a lot of credit. Avengers is not that. Infinity War is not that. I think it's just the best of those superhero movies in the last 25 years. Mike, what's your take?
It's on my list, and I agree with you. But it's on my list because the villain wins. And in American cinema, they usually go for the happy ending, wrap everything up with a nice bow. But I love when directors go against the grain and to shock the world, basically. And if you've seen the movie, which you haven't, sorry, but half the cast does die at the end of this movie, and the bad guy does win.
Yeah.
That's something we thought we'd never see in a superhero movie. This is the culmination of a decade of the MCU. The first time we see every character from every franchise come together to fight Thanos and his army. Minus Ant-Man, he's actually not in this one. And minus, Hawkeye is in this one. Hawkeye's not. I forgot. Yeah.
No, Hawkeye's family.
Yeah, but he's not in Infinity War.
Oh, that's right.
So it's
the beginning of the next one.
So it's the culmination of all the characters minus those two characters, and they're on world, they're on Earth, they're off Earth, and they're fighting this Thanos threat that he's come to get all the Infinity Stones. So it's the first time we've seen all these characters come together, and a lot of them meet for the first time, and we think, oh, this is going to be not easy, but we have the numbers. We have all these different superheroes and all these different powers and abilities. And they're going to come together, and as we think in the comic books, they're going to find a way to vanquish the evil. But obviously they don't, and half the cast dies, and the theater's left. You can hear a pin drop because it's so polarized. You never would have thought that was going to happen. There was so much hype around this movie. You had to really avoid leaks leading up to the actual release date because people were already leaking. I knew Gamora was going to die before I saw the movie. And I wish I didn't know.
Yeah, I didn't know.
Yeah, so
I'm glad I missed
it was the biggest event in comic book history I think we'll ever see.
We talk about going to the theater as it being a communal experience, and I think this is the very definition of that. I'll even go back and listen to audience reactions to the moments that are big moments in this theater, in this movie, in the theater. But for me, when I was in that, I think I was on the debut of this movie with a filled theater. Like you're right, you could hear a pin drop, but also I heard people crying at the end of this movie. Like they were shocked and in tears, and they were like, "This is how it ends." And you've never heard a kind of almost as if that's it kind of sigh once the end credits pop up for the first time. They're like, there was a kind of a hush over the audience, and people were very emotional. And that just goes to tell you they did an awesome job, the Russo brothers, of tying all these different characters together and telling a cohesive story that by the end of it made you feel the impact of losing all of these people and the evil, that the Thanos character, the villain, winning. So yeah, that's part of it. But again, I think that this is just the best of all of them, and it's really well done, and it did something that's never been done before by tying in all these movies together and making it super successful.
Well, that's the thing. Like, I mean, in terms of the title of this list, 2000, the 21st century.
Yeah.
I mean, we have never seen anything like this movie before.
No.
On this scale, there's no way that we thought that they were going to have 30 plus cast members from all these different franchises under the MCU umbrella come together and actually pull this off. Like when you first hear about this shit, this is very ambitious, and there's not a lot of ambitious type movies that come out anymore. And it's something we've never seen before. Again, like I said, I know we have Secret Wars and I guess Doom Wars, whatever's going to come out after this, but nothing's going to top this. To me, is going to be the pinnacle of it all because it's the first time we ever saw anything like it.
Yeah, and the upcoming ones, they all have a formula to follow, and so I think that's going to lack the originality of what we saw. Mm-hmm. Even you can be argued though, Infinity War had also a formula to follow with the success of the Avengers movie previously, but still, I think just the massive event the MCU was. I know it's still going on, but it really felt like a bookend with Infinity War and Endgame. It really was a bookend to that 10 years of, that superhero craze, and they just ended it perfectly. So, Avengers: Infinity War. I think it's one of the must see movies of the last 25 years. Okay, what's one on your list, Mike?
The first one I have on my list is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
The Quentin Tarantino directed, and it stars Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio. Also stars an unknown Austin Butler and a relatively unknown Margaret Qualley, who, if you've seen The Substance with Demi Moore, you know who that is. Mm. I think that movie probably shot her to like A-list superstardom because you're playing off of what I would consider one of the greatest actresses of all time in Demi Moore. This was also a great comeback vehicle for her, but just in terms of this cast, there's a lot of up-and-coming actors mixed in with like what I consider legacy acts in Leo and Brad Pitt.
Yeah.
And
you can't have two better leads.
You can't. And also, I mean, I got to shout out Margot Robbie's also in this.
An understated performance.
Yeah, she plays the fictional version of this whole movie takes place in a fictionalized version of 1970s LA. So she plays Sharon Tate. If you're familiar with the Manson murders, right. She's one of the actresses that was killed by his followers. But the movie is about Leo, who's this kind of aging out of his prime actor. And
television actor.
Yeah,
right?
And struggling with like losing his identity as I used to be the guy, now maybe I'm not the guy. Mm-hmm. Do I still have it? So now you see in this movie he really struggles with his inner conflict of, am I still the man? Can I still do it at a high level, or is my career over? And then Brad Pitt, which is funny, Brad Pitt in the film plays Leo's stunt double, which they look nothing alike.
Yeah.
So I thought that was I was a little bit jarring to hear at first, but the dynamic between the two of them is great. Yeah. Even in the film, they have their own plots. They can be two separate films. Yeah, they do. Like Brad Pitt's character ends up like on the Manson compound area. Basically, he picks up Margaret Qualley's character, who's a part of this Manson group, and gets taken out there. And for a moment, you're watching the movie and you think this might have just made a turn from dramedy to maybe horror, because you think maybe this character's not going to make it. And that's what I love about this movie is it takes so many turns that are not predictable. And we talked about before and often, like a lot of movies that come out now can be predictable because they're following a similar pattern, or they're using the same tropes that all the other movies do. And what I love about Tarantino is he tries to be as original as possible. To me, he's like he's like that last gunslinger, that old gunslinger. He still got it. He's making movies for true filmmakers and lovers of film like myself. And of course, anytime you make a movie about making movies, I'm always going to be all in. And the fact that it takes place in 70s LA, when people are still smoking like chimneys, like I love seeing that time period because I'm not of that time. So I like seeing that era, what Hollywood looked like. Tarantino, I think, I'd say he's just as good, maybe if not better, than Michael Mann in capturing a specific time period in LA with the camera. What he does with the camera behind the lens is nothing short of brilliant. And I think, again, you can't compare any of Tarantino's films to say they're anything like each other. And so I think you could really say any era that Tarantino puts a movie out, he's redefining what cinema can be and what you can do with creativity. He does dialogue so well. This whole movie is just like 2.5 hours of dialogue, and he just lets the actors do their thing because he trusts them so much, and they just give like an amazing performance. And for me, it's a perfect movie.
Yeah, I would say that I wish I would have known that this movie going into it was following a similar formula as Inglourious Basterds, one of his previous movies, where it's changing history. Mm-hmm. And so it's giving you an alternate take on history. If I would have known that better, I think I would have been a little bit better prepared for the movie than I was. Because I think most of us know the Manson story. And so when it didn't fold out the way that it typically does, it clicked in my mind, oh, okay, this is another Inglourious Basterds kind of alternate history. He's going on a similar storyline to this. I will say that this movie has... just to add to why I think it should be on this list, not that it is on mine, but just to justify, I guess, a little bit more that it belongs in yours. I think it has one of the greatest acting turns by an actor, Leo DiCaprio, that I've ever seen, where he's acting like an actor.
Yes.
So in the role, it's an Inception, which is kind of weird because he's in Inception, but it's an Inception of an actor acting as an actor, and like when he acts bad and then he acts good, like when he acts really good as the actor. Golly, you have to really see the end of this movie to get what I'm saying.
It's like triple meta. Really.
It is really meta.
Yeah.
But he pulls it off so good when he flips the switch and goes into that villain for the television show that he's filming. That scene is so good, and the little girl that's acting with him is so good. She even confirms it for the entire audience when she's like, "That's the greatest acting I've ever seen." You know what I mean? And he's crying at that compliment but both moments, him acting as that villain who's really good at what he, and him afterwards reacting to the little girl's comments. That's still both him acting. It's so good.
It is.
It is so, yeah.
It makes me wonder because, Leo's, I think, close to 50.
Yeah.
So this was 2016, I believe.
Yeah. I don't know. I think, yeah.
No, it's more recent than that. Actually,
2018 maybe.
Yeah, normally I know my years, I'm off. But it makes me wonder how much real life played into some of the performance, like the aging actor.
You think he's...
And wondering, just channeling some of that, because I'm sure, like, actors, just inherently, they have, like, this vanity and this ego, like, okay, I'm the best, especially when you get to his level and Brad Pitt's level. And I wonder if he starts to see, like, this young crop of actors, and he's like, man, they're kind of threatening to take, I used to be that guy that everybody wanted a piece of, and now so much he's more kind of behind the scenes, like, in his personal life. Where the Austin Butlers and the Timothy Chalamets and Zendayas, they're out
getting
there.
Those younger...
and they're still out there everywhere you look.
I wouldn't think... I mean, to me, Leo's in a class almost by himself. I don't know if there's very many people up there. I mean, him, Denzel. Maybe you might be able to even put Brad up there. I don't even know if Brad's up there. So, Like he's in a very unique place. Meryl Streep, like way up there.
Yeah.
I don't know. But yeah, I guess so. I guess if there's roles that you really desired as an actor, but you're aged out of them, that could really cause you some of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, Inglorious Bastards, man, great pick.
That's not. That was the.
I'm sorry.
Once upon a time in Hollywood.
Okay, sorry, cut that. I'm sorry.
Don't believe in it.
No, no,
That's hilarious.
I'm thinking of Inglorious Bastards.
Just like a while back, you did Doc Holliday, but it was Doc Hollywood. That's a great moment in Mike and Molly podcast history. I'm telling you.
So again, Inglorious Bastards, great pick.
You said it again.
I did it on purpose.
Okay.
All right, so my next choice on my list is The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. This is 2001, so just
The first one?
The first one,
No, sir.
Absolutely.
Is that your? Well, hold on. Go ahead. I'll ask you in a minute.
Yeah, let me get through my choice. No, look, I think it's the most spectacular of the Lord of the Rings. Well, no. Do I think that the quality improved in other films? Yes, I get it. But to me, this first film was what allowed the others in order to. I know that they had the trilogy already planned from the very beginning. In fact, at the end of the first movie, not the end of the trailer for this movie, it says a trilogy, the first of a trilogy. So they already knew they were going to do 2 and 3. But to me, if this failed at the box office, I don't know if there'd be much interest in 2 or 3. Mm-hmm. So, like most movies, if this was a success with moviegoers, which it'd be hard probably not to be, then maybe definitely the other two, maybe the other two won't get made. Who knows? It depends on how much this one could potentially tank. There was so much they could have got wrong with this movie. It could have looked like something on the Sci-Fi Channel. It didn't have to look as grand as it did. It looked expansive. It looked big. It looked like it was filmed. Obviously, it can make a territory, it can make a country an idle tourist spot for decades. Mm-hmm. New Zealand, make it because people want to go visit quote unquote Middle Earth. That's what this movie started. The acting, the casting is perfect. It is pitch perfect for this movie to the point where you can't see other people potentially in these roles. Like anyone who plays in Lord of the Rings from here on out, they're going to be compared to the people that were in this movie.
You're right.
It cemented that. And it's Peter Jackson. That started his, he was doing The Frighteners before this with Michael J. Fox. This made him a big director. This movie started that. So, look, if you're going to go through the top films to watch of the last 25 years, I would challenge you to find a more impactful series. There might be a couple, but I would challenge you to find one more impactful than The Lord of the Rings. Like, I'm not talking about The Hobbit, I'm talking about The Lord of the original, the first. And if this one fell the way of a B movie in its special effects, in its acting, in its direction, in its cinematography, it fell that way, and it didn't feel like a big movie. It felt cheap. It felt full of green screen. The special effects were lacking. If any of that was true, maybe it's not what it is today. Mm-hmm. But because this movie kicked it all off in 2001, mind you, 2001, this is when this came out. And if they had got any piece of that wrong, it might not be where it is today in what I think is the upper echelon of the greatest movie trilogies ever made, and maybe some of the greatest stories ever told through movies. This falls in that category, and it so easily could have been something that people just ignored. Because if you're not a reader of this, it might be hard to get your head around the fantasy aspects of it. Mm-hmm. And if you are a reader of this, they are diehard and they have very specific wants and things they want to see and characters they want. And in this movie, you don't hear about people saying, "Man, I wish so and so had played that character instead," or "I envisioned his characters differently in the book." Don't hear much of that anymore. What you hear is there's only one Gandalf. Mm-hmm. Everybody knows who Gandalf is. It's Ian McKellen. That's Gandalf. Or like Elijah Wood. Elijah Wood can't even hardly separate himself from that character anymore. Viggo Mortensen had an entire career because of this movie. Orlando Bloom too.
Yeah.
He wouldn't have had Pirates without this. Like there's so much that kicked off for this, and it all hinged on this being a success. And it was a huge one that kicked off something that has not been seen very often in the last 25 years. So that makes this an absolute must see for me, along with the second and third one. But if you only can watch one, watch the first one. Get it started right. Because if you started with two, started with three, you're missing a very critical part. You need this.
No, I'm not arguing that.
Yeah.
I'm not arguing that at all. Something you said about if you're like the diehard fans who read the books, you get it. If you didn't, maybe you didn't. I didn't know there were books when I saw the first one.
Yeah, dude. Stephen Colbert talks so
I
much.
I loved the first one to the point where I was like, well, when the other two come out, I'm gonna be there for sure.
Yeah.
And to this day, I haven't read the books, but I will say, I was talking to a friend about this recently. That's I think that's the only trilogy I've only seen one time all the way through.
You're not a big fan of it, huh?
Well, it's not that I'm not a big fan. I think it kind of has the Black Hawk Down effect. Like it's just
Interesting.
It's
Go
just so
into
many.
more.
It's so many dramatic things happening for a full 2 hours straight. Like by the end, you're just exhausted. And I know people who are hardcore, diehard fans of this trilogy. Every different edition that gets released, they're like, I gotta have that.
Yeah.
There's like 50 different editions. I'm exaggerating, but
You're talking about physical media.
yeah, of different editions, like the extended version, the director's cut, the
Right.
deleted scenes, all this. There's different versions of this franchise that have been released since 2001.
Yeah.
Like whenever Return of the King came out, 2004, 2005.
Oh, I think it's later,
Later.
like 2008.
Yeah, but the first one. Okay, what I'll say is this franchise, specifically the first one. You just talking about the first one. A lot of heart, a lot of battles, a great depiction of what, if you had to think of what a battle on Middle Earth would look like, it looks like Peter Jackson found a way to go there somehow, and if the place existed,
Yeah.
was able to capture it in his mind, and then gathered a team and assembled a team and recreated what he saw in real life. It didn't feel, like you said, it didn't feel fake or cheesy or corny.
Could have easily been.
The stakes, you felt the stakes. You felt for the characters. You could feel for the dynamic. At the end, I don't know anybody that doesn't cry when Sam's swimming in the water and he can't swim and he's drowning trying to get to Frodo. Like it hits so many different beats that people just connect to on a human level. And you're talking about characters in a fantasy world,
Yeah.
but they still didn't find a way to humanize every aspect of it. So I get it.
All right. So that's my choice. Lord of the Rings.
Now, what's your favorite one of the three, though? Real quick.
I think it is Return of the King. The battle. Although I like the journey. I definitely do like the journey, but the two towers. Our heroes are separated throughout the entire thing, and it all culminates with Return of the King. And I think visually, all the eye candy is a lot in Return of the King because that's such a we don't usually see battles on that scale. And then Gandalf returning with the Ghost Army and if I am thinking of the right, I might be thinking of the wrong. They all kind of blend together for me. And here's the thing: and I'm not a huge fan of Lord of the Rings either, but it was definitely a movie event you felt like you had to go be a part of. But by the end of it, I had to wait just like everybody else for the next ones to come out, then the next one to come out, the next one to come out, and that's years that you're waiting for them to come out. So, so everybody was just kind of like, well, how's the story going to end, and how is it going to all turn out? We kind of had an idea that that the ring was going to eventually get destroyed, but to see it happen, how it happens, and then I think one of the best parts of the whole trilogy is seeing them reunited and how much they love each other. Through this, because of this journey they went on and the choices that Elijah Wood's character makes there at the end, it's really, I don't know, you feel, because you've been in it for 8 years or however long it took them to make the movies, you feel like they're your family too by the end of it. So Return of the King is probably my favorite. But for some reason, I keep coming back to this first one. There's something about it that I every once in a while, I'll just have an itch to go back and watch again. And then that'll lead you to the rest because you want to see them all. But there's something about after you've been friends with them and you know how the story ends, wanting to go back and remember how it began.
Okay.
Yeah.
Twin Towers for me, by the way. Twin
Two
Towers.
Towers.
No, Two Towers, whatever. Oh, well, I'm sorry, that's insensitive. Whoops.
No,
Two Towers.
It's
Yep.
all right. It happens.
Great choice though.
Yeah.
Valid for sure.
And so, which you said Inglorious Bastards before, and now what's your next?
You keep disrespecting that, man. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. No, I'm gonna go. So we go from one directing titan
Yeah.
to another who's been doing this, I think, longer than any other director we have that's still living, still doing it. Except maybe sans Clint Eastwood, but we're talking about Martin Scorsese. He's been directing movies for
yes.
50 plus years. And his niche, or I guess niche, some people say niche, I don't know, but his
fine, yeah.
is like mob movies, crime dramas.
Yeah.
Like what I love about his movies is they all have that throwback '80s vibe of like gritty crime drama. Really no humor. Like it's
There's
in
no
your
fluff,
face. It's
man.
It's blunt,
Yeah,
bloody,
blunt.
gory. It's
blunt.
brash, and he always finds a way. To me, I think in all of his movies, he's probably the one director that gets I say maybe Christopher Nolan gets the cast right every time, from your leads to your supporting cast, all the way down. And to me, none of that is highlighted more than The Departed, for me.
Ah, yes.
To me, it's the best mobster movie ever done is something he did in the '80s, which was Goodfellas. To me, that's the pinnacle of mobster movies. But what The Departed does is he takes the mobster movie and instead of just giving you the mob side, he gives you both sides, the law enforcement side and the mob side. So you get to see the inner workings of both sides. And what's cool about The Departed is he kind of subverts what you think is a mobster movie, and he has a mobster infiltrate the police side, and then the police side have a cop infiltrate the mob. So you have moles on both sides. And it's one of those, it's one of the greatest cat and mouse moments in film I've ever seen, with Matt Damon and again Leonardo DiCaprio.
Again, yeah.
Like DiCaprio's the cop that gets to infiltrate the mob. Matt Damon's the mobster who infiltrates the police force.
There's no coincidence that one of the greatest actors of the past 25 years would be in the movies that are on top of your must-see list for the past 25
years. Of course. But I think that's what makes it deserving to be on the list, is because unlike Goodfellas, where it just gives you the mob story, it gives you the mob story, but also shows the law enforcement side and how both sides affect each other. And then it also adds the added twist of the mole on both sides. We've never seen a movie about a mole on both sides, and then how they get wind of you have a mole on your side and vice versa, and how to figure that out. And then there's a couple of different twists in this movie, but the biggest one everybody knows, if you've seen it, is when Leo gets shot at the very end of the elevator. You think he's about to make it, he's going to get his way out. Because the whole time Leo's character is paranoid. Because the mob boss, Frank Costello, is played by Jack Nicholson, which is a very disturbing character for Jack Nicholson to play. He's a mob boss. He's clearly off the rails, unhinged in this movie. But he's also paranoid, because Matt Damon's kind of feeding him information. Hey, that's how he finds out you got a mole on your side. So he's trying to figure out who it is. The audience knows it's Leo. And
a lot of tension.
And he's just trying to figure out, hey, how much longer do I have to be undercover? This guy's crazy. He's going to figure out it's me. And you think towards the end, he's right in the last 10 minutes of the film, you think he's going to get out. Nope. Elevator opens, gets popped in the head, gets killed. A lot of people die in this movie.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are shocking. But, I mean, the way the movie ends is perfect. With Matt Damon getting killed in his apartment. He thinks he got away scot-free.
Yeah.
He's running the division of the law enforcement, and it gets killed. So there's so many different elements in a mob movie that we hadn't seen before. And to me, this is the pinnacle of it. And because it's after 2000, it's on the list.
There you go. I do want to clear up one thing, though. I mentioned Inglourious Basterds, and in jest, that wasn't a knock on your choice or a knock on you at all. It was just a knock on myself for getting it wrong earlier. So
Gotcha.
That's why I always like to bring back things into the podcast. That's what I was doing. All right, so to me, the greatest James Bond movie ever made was made in the last 25 years. I know it's a bold statement to make, but I really feel that way.
Destro's not going to be happy with you.
Destro is my friend who is a huge James Bond lover.
Specifically the Timothy
Dalton 2 films. which he still challenges you. He was excited about your
Yeah.
challenging you to watch those two
I've
movies.
accepted 100%.
And but to me, Casino Royale from 2006 is the greatest Bond movie ever made. And one of the reasons why, obviously, I think the film is perfect. But Daniel Craig, when he was announced as Bond, I didn't see it. I was like, this is not a traditional Bond. He's a little bit older, I think, than we thought a Bond would be. That's starting out like a beginning Bond, and he was a blonde, and he just didn't seem to fit the profile for me until I watched Layer Cake, which is the movie that he made right before he made Casino Royale, his first Bond movie. And you see in that movie why they chose him for Bond and why no one after Casino, well, I don't say no one, but I didn't hear anyone talking about how terrible a casting choice Daniel Craig was after Casino Royale came out. Because he ended up being the perfect Bond for that movie. It was a more aggressive Bond. He wasn't as tongue in cheek, although he does have some of that charm but he uses that charm as a way to get information rather than just making quips for quips' sake or in funny moments when they're in a firefight or something of that nature. That's not this Bond, and I think the film really Martin Campbell did a wonderful job in this movie. Martin Campbell also did another one of what I think is one of the best Bonds, maybe the second best, maybe almost right up there with GoldenEye. I think that GoldenEye is the best Pierce Brosnan Bond movie. Destro, I think you'd agree with me on that one. But this movie, I don't know if you remember though. The beginning of this movie is in black and white.
I remember everything about this movie because I saw it in the theater in 2005, and I own the DVD, and whenever it's on, I watch it.
Yeah.
And what I loved about this movie is, you're probably about to get to it, but
No, go ahead.
some of the things you just said here a second ago,
Preach.
the reason we're getting this iteration of
Me.
Bond is because
Preach.
he's so brash, he's kind of rough around the edges,
Yes.
is because this is Bond just getting his 00 status.
Yeah.
And you talk about the black and white scene, setting
Considerably.
it up. Yeah.
Right? No, I mean, I think it just hints at, okay, well, this is not a typical Bond movie that we're used to seeing. This is not the Roger Moore campy Bond. It's not the Sean Connery, I don't like uber masculine Bond. It's not the charming Pierce Brosnan. It's more like Timothy Dalton. Honestly, it's more realistic. It's not like the books, Destro. I'm gonna have to go with you on that. It's not like the books, but to me, this is maybe the definition of the perfect film. Let's say the perfect action film for me. I think this is for me. This is one of the best movies, the best of the Bond, one of the best movies ever. And I don't know. There's so much to talk about. I can't talk about it. I don't. If you've not seen this movie, it is so a must see on this list for
And you
me.
missed out because this was definitely meant for the big screen.
Well, yeah, and you're about to go see the 10-year anniversary of Interstellar on the big screen. That's probably a big bonus on the big screen as well. Me, it's the adventure of it. It's the Mad Mikkelsen, the bleeding eye villain of it. The Ava Green, the love interest in the movie where she's his quippy match. And it's surprising a little how quickly they fall in love for me, a little bit, to the point where he's willing to give up his 00 status in order to be with her. A little fast to me, but if I had any hang-ups about it, but ultimately you figure out kind of why, and then there's a heartbreaking ending, and ultimately it's supposed to be Casino Royale is the first, I believe, of the Bond books, and thought to be unfilmable for some reason. The thing that I heard was that the Baccarat is not something that a lot of people. I know they had it in GoldenEye, but Baccarat is not something that people often play, and that was the biggest part of the Casino Royale, the game. They changed it to Texas Hold'em in this one, but I don't think that would make it unfilmable, but they were able to achieve that more than anything, beyond anyone's expectations, I believe. And again, I think it's the best Bond movie and one of the best films ever made. You got to go see it, Casino Royale.
I would have said that if they hadn't released Skyfall in 2012. I would say, but to me, Skyfall is peak Bond for me. And I'm gonna tell you why, because for everything that Casino Royale is, everything you said is accurate. I didn't like the fact that we had all this amazing story, only to have him retire because he fell in love. That to me seemed a little that cheapened everything we had seen leading up to that.
Yeah.
And I mean, overall, I'd still say 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10. Yeah. But then 7 years later, we get Skyfall. To me, that is the perfect Bond movie.
The one thing Skyfall is missing for me to not to be on this same level. I don't think it's on the same level for me. It's close, but it's not. No, it's not even close. I'm sorry. That's a misnomer. It's good. They tried to and they couldn't cast Sean Connery. If they had cast Sean Connery as Bond's either father, or I think they switched it to Albert Finney's character, who was like the
caretaker.
Yeah. If they had gotten Sean Connery like I think they wanted to, it would have connected a little bit. I think that would have been perfect. So that hurts it a bit for me. And again, I still myself think that Casino Royale is just a better adventure action movie to me, and the stakes are higher. Plus, again, you remember I've said this, and I'm going to have a little bit more on this list. The first one always gets a little bit more credit for me. The one that kicks it off, and this kicked off the Daniel Craig era of Bond, so it does get a little bit. Like I said, in GoldenEye, the first Pierce Brosnan Bond, I give it a little bit more credit than most because it kicked it off. It could have easily been a one and done, if everybody hated Bond. So it does get a little bit of that for me as well. But Skyfall's an excellent movie. I'm not knocking it, other than to say that I still think Casino Royale is still the best Bond. You don't, but I do.
No,
that's fine. That's fine.
There's a debate in there, but I'm just not ready to have it. I'm not ready to have it. And I'm sure this is going to come up again later on in the podcast, another episode. So
we might do a Bond only top 10 list, but I don't know if.
I don't know if I have.
We'd have to have Destro on. I'm just saying.
Yeah, exactly.
We would have to.
Oh, but it's a great choice though, and it deserves to be on the list. I think you could interchange that or Skyfall for this particular list.
Made my argument. What do you got? What's your next one?
This one is going to be more indie, and I think you've seen it.
It needs an indie.
Yeah,
you need an indie.
It does. It's not one that I ever really hear people discuss, and it was revolutionary in the way it was filmed. Even though there's been a few horror films filmed in this format that weren't quite as effective because it seemed almost a little too gimmicky. But when this movie comes out, the way they used this particular type of technology to communicate with others, it was engaging because you only had one lens to really look through, and you have to find a way to get the whole story in front of this one lens. And this movie is Searching with John Cho.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
This movie, it was remarkable to me. I saw this in theaters because you know me, the trailer had me hooked. Oh, this is all filmed through the webcam.
Yeah.
And there's been horror films like Unfriended 2, were both filmed in the same format, but it was gimmicky, it was cheesy, lower budget. Also,
something that should be filmed during the pandemic.
Yeah, for sure. But watching this, I was pleasantly surprised with what I saw. I went in with mediocre expectations. I'm a big fan of John Cho, and again, the style that it was shot, only giving us only one outlook to see through, and you have to tell this whole story in this one frame. It was brilliant, and I know recently there was a Tom Hanks film that came out with the same kind of format that Robert Zemeckis shot, where it's just the one camera over the period of history.
Yeah.
I'm actually not hearing good reviews about that movie, but it's neither here nor there.
I think it's just it's not. It's an experiment in filmmaking. That's what you kind of.
It is, and but with Searching, it's a great story. It's about a father who's looking for his missing daughter, and he's just trying to figure out how I can find any information onto her, where her whereabouts could be, what happened to her, is she dead, is she alive. The ending, again, they go kind of against your normal, typical Hollywood ending, like the daughter does end up dead in this movie.
Are we giving it away?
Yeah, we're giving it away. I'm sorry, man. If you didn't see it, you
missed out.
Because here's the thing, I haven't seen it since it came out, but I would watch it again, even knowing the ending, because it's just a really well told story. The way they use that basically one angle of the webcam to tell it all. There's a couple of twists in there with I think it's the daughter's missing, so it'll be her uncle. So John Cho's brother. There's information that he had that he didn't come forward with, and you kind of think it's one thing just as an audience member, but then he kind of explains it and you realize that's something else. The way they kind of switch from the webcam to like the news outlet basically. So they do switch angles, but it's still all told through as if it's a recording and you're looking through, you're recording everything. It was a really genius way to use that. Not easy to do. And like I said, I've seen it done worse, and this to me is probably about as good as you can get to film using a webcam to tell a story, especially with different locations and actors and moving parts.
Yeah, so I think I would argue that this would make the list because it reflects the time period more necessarily than it's one of the greatest films made in the last 25 years. Mm-hmm. It's more of like what our life, a snapshot of kind of where we are in the last 25 years, particularly, with the pandemic happening during that time. That's a perfect, like how we got through the pandemic was through these webcams and trying to make connections through non-personal means, you know what I mean? But that sense of isolation that's there as well. Mm-hmm. And for the father, because I've seen this film as well, the helplessness that he has, because he's only got these forms of communication to try and find the most important person in his life, mm-hmm. and relying on others and then trying to figure it out as a mystery. It's almost like Sherlock Holmes if he was locked in a room and only had, what in this particular case, a webcam to try to figure out a mystery. I would say that it's better as a snapshot of where we are today. Like if somebody watches Searching 50 years from now and webcams are like phone booths or like telegraphs, or like people just don't use, or they use something different, and then it would be a very dated film. But it is a snapshot of like the last 25 years and where we are technology wise for sure. And although it some films are considered dated because some of the films I watch, they're using a flip phone. I'm like, golly, that was a long time ago. And that gives you an idea of when it was filmed. In this case, I think it might help in justifying it being on this list because it's a snapshot of this time period that we're specifying. So, all right. And now we go back into my tentpole, giant, massive, popular list with Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Now, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone is the first of the Harry Potter movies. This took place also in 2001. Big year for movies, 2001, when it comes to these kind of epic fantasy movies with Lord of the Rings coming out at the same time.
This is a big surprise for me.
I'm not a huge Harry Potter fan. I definitely admit that I've seen them all because I felt like you had to see them all. But Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, the book is based on a large book series by J.K. Simmons. No, wait, I'm not. J.K. Rowling. J.K. Simmons is an actor. J.K. Rowling. And it's actually based on the book Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. And they changed it to Sorcerer's Stone for the U.S. audience because I think they thought it sounded sexier, or they thought that we wouldn't know what philosophers didn't mean the same as over in England as it does here.
Because Americans are dumb.
Anyway, this stars Daniel Radcliffe, Emma Watson, Richard Harris, who originally played Dumbledore before he
Wow, you just disrespected Rupert Grint like that. Wow.
Yeah.
That's Ron. He's part of the trio. You can't leave Rupert Grint out.
I did. Wow. I don't know. His name is not this. Well, I don't know. All right. Directed by Chris Columbus, who did surprisingly Home Alone and Mrs. Doubtfire. Percy Jackson and the Olympians, The Lightning Thief. That's more kind of this area. But I guess you wouldn't think the guy that did Home Alone, that's the guy that's going to knock it out of the park with Harry Potter. But look, the books were super popular. And there was a lot of expectations, very high bar of expectations for this movie. Specifically, were they going to get the casting right? And I think undoubtedly they did because it spawned what 8 movies I think in total, and they drew this they drew this storyline out as far as possible, even ending the last one in 2 separate movies, and to the point where freaking Daniel Radcliffe was like in his mid 20s or late 20s, still doing still trying to play a high schooler or whatever, however old he was. But you go back and you watch this first film, and man, he looks so young. You realize how young this cast was, and then people just grew up with them.
I think I think they were like 8 years old in the first.
It's so crazy to think, and how iconic and how popular they became. And like they again, like with the Lord of the Rings, there's a lot of expectation to the point where they could have easily got it wrong, and instead they spawned one of the greatest movie franchises in history. And it all starts with this. And again, they had to get so much right. And I am not someone who grew up with these books. Obviously, I'm an old decrepit man, right? But for those kids that did grow up with it, they are fiercely loyal to it. They are fiercely connected to it, and it represents a huge part of their childhood. And I think even probably for some of the people listening to our podcast, Harry Potter holds a very special place in their life because they read the books when they were a kid. They wanted to go to that Hogwarts. They wanted to be with Harry Potter. Oh, which house would I be in? Would I be go Gryffindor? All those things. And look, I'm not a huge fan of it. Yeah, I can still tell you some of this stuff because it was such a big cultural phenomenon. And this is the movie that kicked all of that off. I would argue it's not necessarily hard to jump on the train once it's going. If you started it, then the second movie or the third movie, you get the gist of it. But this one was what kicked it off. So if I'm going to recommend one of the many Harry Potter movies for someone to watch who's never watched those movies, it's got to be the first one. So
You and your got to be first. Got to be first. You know what? I watched all these movies except for the first one, and it's like.
Fine. Why did you watch the first one? If you watched them all anyway, just no interest.
I started with the second one, and I was like, "These are 8-year-olds." No, I'm good, man.
I got it.
And so
I got you.
But I mean, yeah, the franchise was great. I was never I never got caught up in the fandom of it.
Yeah.
But a couple of years ago, there was the Hogwarts Legacy video game that came out.
Yeah, very popular.
And I played that game and loved that game. I even signed up for WB Studios to get my what my group would be, Ravenclaw, Gryffindor, all that, and I was a Ravenclaw. Shout out to my Ravenclaws if you're listening.
Fingers. I literally don't know what I'm talking about.
And so that's the house. That's your house. Yeah. So Slytherin, Ravenclaw, Gryffindor, and I forgot the other.
Oh, I know, but I don't know what There's one that's evil, one that's
well, Slytherin's bad.
Yeah.
Slithering like a snake.
Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, I never felt the need to go back and watch the second one. I just started the first one. I started at the second one and just kept going forward.
I think this is, and it falls within. It's just like the Star Wars for a lot of us. Like, this is that for other people, not for us, but for kids that grew up, kids that grew up with Star Wars. I think those same people that grew up with Harry Potter feel that way about Harry Potter. Maybe not the movies as much as the books, but I think they're very loyal and loving of the franchise.
I think it's not even more about it's moved beyond the movies now. It's more about the theme park they have and whatever the one is.
Those are adults now wanting to walk.
But
into
I mean, nobody's going.
Yeah.
No, there's not a new generation of Harry Potter fans. Not the movies anyway.
Yeah.
But Star Wars, I think, is still kind of confined new generations of fans, but. Obviously not me. I'm not a big Star Wars fan, but anyway, it's a great choice, and it should be on the list. I thought about that as you were talking about it. I was like, yeah, that's a good one. Just as long as I was there.
I do my research,
and I do not. But I'm gonna pivot to war movies and depictions of.
You had me at war.
Yeah, real life war, which I'm not a big war movie guy, but I've seen a bunch of the bigger movies like. I mentioned before, now I'm drawing a blank. Black Hawk Down,
Yeah.
and
Saving Private
the Thin
Ryan.
Red Line, the Saving Private
Yeah.
Ryan, 1917. You know, what are some of the bigger ones from the 80s, Platoon. You know, but this one to me, and up until Saving Private Ryan, there was to me no more real depiction of war. But to me, this is like a more intimate look at what war does to just a man and his psyche, and that's Fury.
Brad Pitt.
I mean, it's stellar cast. Again, you have
Yeah.
Brad Pitt, Michael Pena, John Bernthal, you have Logan Lerman, and Shia LaBeouf, and they all knocked it out of the park for their roles
You're in that tank with them.
the whole time.
Yeah.
Like you can almost smell how dirty it is in there because those guys haven't bathed in weeks. You can see they look dirty. They're tired. They're at each other's throats. They're just mentally, they're just like not in a good space, but they have to continue to go wherever they're told to go. You got to go defend these guys. You got to go help these guys out, assist over here. Like there's no stopping. This was during World War II.
Yeah, and it feels disconnect. They feel disconnected from. They're not in a big battalion. Like they're out on the outskirts and they're kind of by
Yeah,
themselves.
they're just like running solo missions. They're just like, hey, wherever we need you to go, we need you to go there.
So
And
it
there's
adds
no
to that
backup.
isolation.
Yeah, like they're the backup basically wherever they go, kind of.
Yeah.
And from beginning to end, like you feel like you're right there in it.
Yep.
The dialogue feels so realistic. The performances are off the charts. There's just a lot of sadness to the movie, which is what war invokes. A lot of destruction.
And it's weird. It contrasts to the beauty of the landscape, and you know it's an idyllic place just itself, with the green pastures, the beautiful cottages, and then it's in the midst of this terrible war. Yeah.
And even the fact that so Brad Pitt is the leader in this tank, in this group, and the other four guys, you can tell. Well, the other three guys, Logan Lerman is like the new guy that has to replace one of the guys that got killed.
He represents us basically.
Yeah.
He's our entry into.
And then over the 2 hours, he kind of becomes one of those guys. He becomes tainted by the effects of war.
That's right.
And what it does to the psyche. And by the end of it, you know, they get to a position where they have to make a decision. Do we abandon the tank because something's happened to the tank, or do we stay? But it's important for them to stay in terms of just the overall grand scheme of the war. But if they stay, they're definitely doomed. Like you get that vibe from the get-go. And Brad Pitt decides, I'm going to stay, you guys go, because they're all like...
You love spoiling these movies, man. Let me tell you.
No. I'm not spoiling what happens after, though.
All right, okay, all right. I didn't know how far you're going to go.
No, because everything that happens after the decision for him and then ultimately the rest of the crew because of their loyalty to him to stay is just, it's beautiful. But it's haunting, it's sad, it's heroic, it's all of that. But you see, no one really changes in the film except for Logan Lerman's character. Because like you said, he's basically us. And then over time, he kind of becomes one of them. And they're kind of like degenerates in a way. Or the John Bernthal's character is kind of comes off that way. But you can just tell these guys were probably just normal, regular guys, hardworking, blue-collar workers. But then
It's more of a talk about the effects of war.
yeah,
What they've
that's what I'm
seen,
saying. Like it
what
transformed.
they've had to do.
Yeah.
And it just, Lerman's character is just new to it. Hasn't gone through it.
Right.
So once he sees what they've seen and done what they've done, then he becomes one.
Yeah. One of the most heartbreaking scenes is when Brad Pitt basically says, you have to be able to kill. I need to know you can kill if you need to. Otherwise, you're going to get us all killed. And he makes Logan Lerman kill this guy. He places the gun in Logan Lerman's hand, and he forces him to pull the trigger and kill the guy. Like, it's just like, this is what it takes to be in this world, to be in this war. Tough watch, but man, it was really good. Even the battle sequences shot so well, so realistic. Like you feel like this could have been just like a documentary on a specific moment in World War II. Felt so real, very good.
I'm sorry. I got lost in it a bit because I was going back to that moment and I was in it. I was like, oh God.
It's heavy, but it's one of those.
It is heavy.
Like,
It is
I
heavy.
recommend everybody see that movie.
Yeah, it's a good movie. Yeah, it's definitely it's one of those movies you don't go for the enjoyment, you go for the experience, and I think the stellar acting. I think it's really good. Okay, last one on my list. Is it hard to understand if I'm going to say it was hard for me to put on here, but also easy? Like it was I didn't want to pick another franchise. I wanted to pick. I wanted to pick really an individual, just a solo story within one movie. And this is a movie that it's haunting in a very good way for me. I keep going back to it. This is a movie you have to watch at least twice. If you don't watch it at least twice, you're not going to really get what's going on because there are some flash forwards that you don't understand that you think are flashbacks. They present them as flashbacks, but they're actually flash forwards. And so it makes everything a lot more clear by the end of it because they don't explain the flash forwards to the end. So it has a Memento type feel to that. Way better done. No offense to Christopher Nolan. Way better than Memento. Memento, excuse me, Memento. Okay, so this movie is The Arrival from 2016.
Oh man, I hate we're gonna do this because I was just discussing this with my sister.
Yeah.
And I've only seen it once in the theater, and she wanted to talk about it, and I was like, I don't want to because I want to watch it again before we discuss it. But now we're here, like it's always like
You're gonna have to.
I'm gonna have to. All right.
Or just remain quiet, I guess. You don't have to.
I'm gonna cover my ears.
Amy Adams, Jeremy Renner. I was worried about Jeremy Renner in this movie. Jeremy Renner is such a he is specifically at the what did he do? Let's see. He did
The Hurt Locker.
that was when he exploded, and then he went into a different franchise. So he went to the Bourne movie, and that was a flop.
That was a one and
then he
done.
went to the Mission Impossible. I thought he was miscast in that. He was a big name at the time. Like he was, and he took kind of a subservient role to Tom Cruise for that film. It didn't feel like it. I thought he was going to be bigger than he was in that movie. So I was worried about when he was cast in this, or that I saw that he was in this. I was like, how does that actor, the Bourne actor, the Mission Impossible actor, how does he fit into this? And as a scientist is what he plays in this movie. I think he works. I forget what it is that he does, but I think he's a mathematician. I forget though. Please excuse me for forgetting it. But specifically, he plays a scientist. And that's not a scientist guy typically. He doesn't play scientist. Surprisingly, very believable. That didn't have an issue with him. I was just saying that there was some like, oh, Jeremy Renner, wow, that seems a little bit sideways to be in this cast for this movie. No, totally not. Totally get it. Forrest Whitaker's excellent in this movie. I love Forrest Whitaker and probably everything he's done since Bloodsport. I love Forrest Whitaker. Directed by Denis Villeneuve.
Oh, Denis Villeneuve, my guy.
Our Dune guy.
Yeah.
And it shows. This movie is beautifully filmed. And an intricate story told expertly. All the things we see in Dune and Dune 2, and listeners know how much we loved Dune 2. I'm sure you did too. He showed all of that in this movie. It is a beautiful, haunting, perfectly toned movie. It is somehow intimate when it comes to Amy Adams, while also vast in showing what is ultimately a spaceship and contact with aliens. So Amy Adams plays a linguist who is tasked by the military, by the U.S. military, to try and figure out an alien language, how to talk to aliens, and who have made themselves known on different places on the planet. So different countries are all involved, and a lot of this movie is about the lack of really communication between countries and what they're willing to share and what they aren't. The ultimate, which ultimately is kind of one of the main themes of this movie, is that can we get along with each other for a common goal? And I think a lot of the movie tells you that we can't, but you'll have to watch it. I'm not going to spoil this one. This one is a treasure. This is a treasure of a movie. One of the greatest movies ever made. One of the greatest movies of the last 25 years. And specifically, a non-franchise movie. They don't need an Arrival 2. This is a one-off, beautifully made.
They could call it Departure.
Beautifully made, beautifully constructed movie that will you will think about afterwards, and that you will need to go see. You need to see it again because now you know the what is ultimately the twist of the movie. Because there's flashbacks that are happening that you're thinking are flashbacks, and that might give away a spoiler. And I'm sorry if I did, but I don't think it'll take away from. You'll forget what I said.
No, you telling them that is going to help them understand the story better.
It is, but it also I think it ruins the second watching. You know what I mean? Like it's like you get to watch the movie twice in a different way. That's one of the things that I love about movies that they. I don't like the confusion part because I think you should tell the story, but I think the confusion is necessary here because it reveals such a great little surprise at the end for you.
True.
So it's basically like what we're doing is we're unwrapping the presents for them by telling them about the flash forwards, but you still at the end of the day you have an awesome present for Christmas.
Yes, exactly.
So, but yeah, so that's The Arrival. I've gushed over this movie too much, but I think it's a lot of these films that I mentioned. Well, actually, all of them are all the Avengers. So superhero MCU, Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, Casino Royale with James Bond, they're all part of franchises. This is the one I felt like I had to put in a representation of a movie that's just a solo story. And I think it's one of the greatest movies made ever. And it's a must watch if you haven't seen it since 2000.
Love it.
Yeah.
That was great. And for the last one for me, I'm gonna kind of take a page out of your book. Is
Piggyback.
I'm going with the first of the franchise.
Oh, look at
The
you
first
following in line.
I'm
About
doing it.
time. You started to learn from the master.
And there's been I've been in a lot of conversations recently about this franchise and specifically this movie.
You have a lot of conversations, aren't you? You've been having like your sister you talked about, friends you've talked about,
Movies.
co-workers. You've been
I talk
having a lot of conversations.
I talk a lot about movies with a lot of people because I'm trying to really just.
It might not be Mike's only podcast. Let's just put it out there. He might be starting a few.
There's a lot of podcasts always in the works with me.
You're always trying to audition my replacements.
We got auditions coming up, live auditions.
Yeah, off mic, on mic. Now looking for another mic. So you have one mic that's on and one mic that's on. All right, go
And
ahead.
then if I ever go to jail, it's Mike behind bars.
Ooh, hey, dude, coming from Leavenworth. Let's go. Well, you have to be in the military for that.
That's true. Yeah. This movie stars one of the two biggest action stars of all time. Yeah, bold claim. I know. I don't do that often. And this movie's been done a million times over throughout the 80s and the 90s. But what's different is there's a rich history with this character's backstory that we only see slivers of as each entry in the franchise goes on. Whereas anytime it was done before in the past, 80s, 90s, it was always, okay, this guy was an expert this, or he's a specialist with this group, and that's the extent of his backstory. This guy's backstory it's a story that's been told a million times. The one guy against the world, been betrayed or been pulled back into a life, and he's got to kill everybody basically. And this guy's backstory is it's the thing of legends within the universe, and he's kind of like a myth. And they give him a nickname, and it's Baba Yaga.
Yeah, I was about to say, kind of like myth of Baba Yaga.
So this is John Wick 1 from 2014.
Yeah, John Wick.
I will never forget the exhilarating feeling I had watching this movie. It felt like an homage to, again, 80s crime dramas. It takes its time. The pacing's done really well. It's not just action, shoot 'em up, bang, bang for an hour, 45 minutes. There's a story, there's a kickoff point, and then you meet this guy. It just seems like a regular guy. He's grieving the loss of his wife from a terminal illness, and then he gets this dog delivered to his door, and he starts to take a liking to this dog really fast, as we do as the audience.
I would have.
I mean, yeah, the dog's a cute dog, cute puppy, man.
I'd kill a lot of people for that dog.
And I've watched movie reactions of this movie 100 times this year, and it never gets old. And the reaction to what happens to the dog is always the same. But what makes this movie stand out from all those other movies, like in the 80s and 90s, where it's Arnold against 50 men, or it's Stallone against 50 men, is again, like I said, this guy has a very specific skill set, and we're already prepped as an audience member to know, okay, this guy's different from everybody else. Like there is a story there about this guy. Everybody kind of seems to know who he is, but he's not someone you want to mess around with. So it's kind of like reputation precedes him. But this one young kid, cocky, arrogant, thinks he can go and mess with John Wick. And we find out John Wick is a part of some group, nothing good, not like Black Ops or Special Forces or anything like that. But he's not a mercenary either. So we don't really know if he's a good or a bad guy.
Oh, I think we know that he's a force of nature.
Well, yeah,
he is something
a force of nature
that people like are deathly afraid of. Even the worst people in the world are deathly afraid of this.
Right, but even at that point, we still don't know if he's a good guy or a bad guy. We just know he's a guy you don't mess with. That could go on either side.
I guess so.
Yeah. But there's so many different monologues about who John is, his origins, and the way they not extrapolate, but now I can't think of the word. But when he's trying to actually build, he's trying to now I can't talk. He's trying to dig up his old life, basically. And while that's happening, there's a voiceover and a monologue about who John is and how the things he's done kind of set up the foundation for basically who we are today. So whatever he did was bad, but it kind of set some things in motion and kind of laid down the foundation for what's to come and what's been. But John's an assassin,
Yeah.
And
it sounds like
the assassin. Like he's the guy. Like if you want to take care of an impossible task, you get John Wick to go do it.
Right.
I think even in the movie they say Baba Yaga's the boogeyman, but then Vigo in the film says this is the guy you kill. This is the guy you send to kill the boogeyman, which I love. Like that just sets up to let you know what kind of guy this is. This guy is dangerous.
It is a great line, actually.
But yeah, like I said, we've seen
exposition.
Exposition. Thank you. Yes.
Took me a minute too.
Yeah, extrapolation, exposition.
No, very close.
But like I said, we've seen Stallone do this many times in the 80s and 90s. We've seen Schwarzenegger do it in the 80s and 90s. But we've never.
Charles Bronson did it.
Yeah,
Bruce Willis.
It's always the lone wolf against everybody, being pulled back into a life he left behind, right? Yeah, it's always some kind of conspiracy.
Something happens to him or his family.
Yeah, it's like revenge.
It makes him, the classic revenge.
Yeah,
Yes.
but the twist here is, and you really can't even explain it from just the first movie because we're only getting bits and pieces of the world he comes from. And with every entry in the franchise, we're up to 4 now. We get a little bit more about John's backstory. The phrase "high table" is not even mentioned until part 2.
Yeah, and it just, like you said, it hints to it because the first movie is a very simple story.
Yeah, it's straightforward.
Like he is wronged
Yep.
and he needs to go get the guy that wronged him. But the one twist about it that I don't think I've seen in a lot of other movies is that any time it felt like John Wick could have got him earlier in the movie, but he wants to make it more painful. He wants to put this guy through more misery to match his.
And what I love is when he finally gets the guy at the end, it's just no talking.
Anticlimactic.
Yeah, it is in a way.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah, like it's just he walks up on him, bullet, boom, he's dead.
In the middle of a sentence.
Yeah.
Because he says it's just a F word, and he didn't even get to say dog.
Didn't get to say it. Yep.
He didn't even get to say
And
it.
and that's why I say Keanu Reeves is one of the biggest action stars of all time.
That's funny because you're telling me Ted from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure is one of the greatest and you would be right. He is.
No, I said Keanu Reeves, not Ted. There's a difference.
I mean, that's the same actor. I'm just saying, in perspective of where he started to what he became.
No, I'm talking. No, I'm not talking. I'm talking strictly from Johnny Utah, Speed, The Matrix.
Yeah. The one.
And then it's only him and Tom Cruise, in my opinion.
Ooh.
Those are the 2 biggest action stars of all time. Think about it this way: Stallone's not doing it anymore. Schwarzenegger's not doing it anymore. Van Damme's not doing it anymore. He's got some kind of medical condition.
Oh, you mean like a current modern day?
Yeah.
Okay, I think all time to me is like, what, Bruce Lee, and I started thinking about other guys. But you mean that are still active today,
Right.
that are like, yes, modern action.
And those
stars.
guys.
The Rock, maybe? I don't know.
Stop it right now. I'll stab you,
At
bro.
one point, I thought he was going to be the next Schwarzenegger, and he's coming out with a Christmas film. I don't.
It's gonna bomb like everything else he does. No, but that's why John Wick belongs on the list because it is the same story we've seen a million times, but with something extra added.
It is. And you know, the gun fu, the gun, I said gun, like gun fu,
Yep.
that is a unique, very unique way to shoot that they just, I didn't discover they invented.
A lot of movies now are copying
Yeah.
the John Wick style, just like they did with the Matrix, the whole bullet time thing.
Crossing Tiger, Hidden Dragon, I remember that when that came out. And kind of the wire work and the floating that did for that movie was awesome. They tried to be redone in other movies like Bulletproof Monk and things like that that
Yeah.
just didn't meet the scale of it. And the wire work became like the hot thing for a little while. I think it's similar.
Yeah, so many action films now. It's like, oh, they're copying Here's John Wick again.
They are, but it's cool. There is some cool stuff.
I mean-
the Equalizer stuff, like
Yeah, but-
Equalizer is what John Wick would be if he was a good guy. If he, you said he was an assassin. He's the Baba Yaga. He's the assassin.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you said, well, he could have been a good guy. Is what you said. I think that's Equalizer
Yeah, it's true.
because he worked for the U.S. military. So
But the only thing is, he's not. But see, John Wick's unique because he's so efficient with the pistol, whereas like Equalizer doesn't ever use a gun. Even Brian from Taken, he uses a gun, but not as efficiently as he's much more martial arts. Whereas John Wick uses a mixture of both, but he always has a weapon, a pistol on him.
God, I saw Taken recently again. Good. It's such a good
Yeah.
movie.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's another show.
Yeah, no, we're talking about John Wick, and
John
I
Wick,
recommend.
good choice.
And once you watch one, you gotta go watch 2, 3, and 4 because,
Yes.
like I said, they continue to peel back the layers, and that's what makes this franchise so unique. Whereas other franchises kind of give you everything in the first one, and kind of just try to, how can we top what we've done now, what we've exposed? This one continues to peel back layers of things you didn't know about his past, about who he's working for, who he used to work for, all that.
I think if you obviously if you love action, you've seen these movies already, but I kind of feel like one is unique from the other 2, 3, and 4 in the sense that you are getting to know obviously a lot more about John Wick, but the first one was such a great isolated story, and the rest feels like just one running story. Literally, he's running the entire time. Like, I never think he ever gets a break between 2, 3, and 4. He feels like he is running through people and going through battles. Especially the last one, the fourth one, it just seems like, especially when he's trying to race to the ending of that movie and up the stairs and all that. Like, everything that he does, especially like the last hour of that movie, he's running the entire time. And I kind of feel like that kind of sums up the 2, 3, and 4. It's just a race through all of that.
Yeah.
Whereas one is get the guy that wronged you.
Yeah, it's just
The
straightforward.
rest of it
narrative.
is like, I got to get out of this.
Yeah.
Almost. Almost. Feels
Yeah,
like
that to
I'm
me,
going to shoot my way through this.
that's what makes one, in my opinion, I've had gone back and forth. I think one is the best one.
I agree. But yeah, great choices, man. Despite the time limitation, great choices.
Hey, 5 minutes, man.
And there it is, folks. We absolutely know that some of the movies that you would have recommended to someone in the last 25 years were not on our list. They did not appear on our list. We know that. And we also want to know from you what those are. What would be on your list of the top 10 movies that you would recommend that everybody should watch, including me and Mike, over the past 25 years here in the 21st century? What would those be? Please reach out to us. Send us your list through social media. We're on X, Twitter, right? We're on Instagram. We're on Facebook. We want to hear YouTube. In the YouTube comment section, that's where we get a lot of them. Go check it out. You can find it. Obviously, how you found this podcast through our link tree. We have all of our social media and our YouTube addresses. Please comment. Let us know what makes your list and why, and we'd love to read that over. Mike, another one in the books, man, and this was a big one. This one was this one could have easily just been like our top 5 favorite movies or whatever from the past 25 years, but I think the angle of like, if you haven't seen these movies, you should go see them. Kind of an angle is really good, and I hope they got something out of it. How do we end this one, Mike?
You know what? This time I got nothing. I got nothing. Before we start shooting this episode, I got some unfortunate news, so I'm a little distracted now. So I got nothing. So
That's all right. I will say this, that we recently got some love on social media, And we just appreciate that people are listening. I went into this podcast with zero expectations about people listening. I just wanted to record our conversations because I thought they were entertaining, and so did you, and that other people who are like-minded like us would find it interesting. And if you're listening to this, I hope you do. We hope you do. And we thank you for listening. And I guess until the next one, Mike.
On to the next. It just doesn't stop.
Well, hey, there's more movies to watch and that means more movies to talk about.
As long as we have a list, we have a podcast.
That's right. We'll always have a list. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Peace.